So, what are traditions anyway? We've answered some questions about traditional marriage and modern marriage and our perceptions of them. But let's get at this word tradition because oftentimes what we think is traditional may not be as traditional as we think. And whatever the word traditional means, it's sometimes vague and has a lot more to do with who gets to say, who gets to define what is tradition and what is not. So, tradition, the sort of normal definition that a lot of people use for tradition, is some practice or idea or object that is at least believed to be continuous or part of the past. A tradition may be very ancient or very recent, but as an ideological element, it is often assumed to be important, authentic, or even superior to non traditional, especially foreign, practices and ideas. So, as you can see in the definition, it has a lot to do with power and who gets to say what is tradition and what is not. If you've watched the lectures on McDonald's, for example, you know that there is a power relation and who gets to say what is traditional Western culture, what is traditional Chinese culture, who gets to determine what those things mean, but also just within our own culture. So, here I actually have some examples of Santa Claus. So, the picture on the top left is what I might call the traditional Santa Claus, going back to the 1800s, early 1900s, and this is the image of Santa Claus that is pretty dominant in much of Western Europe at the time, and also the United States, of this sort of character that walks around in the forest collecting bundles of sticks and things of that nature. He didn't become this jolly person that wears a red suit that comes down your chimney and delivers presents every year until the 1940s and 1950s, sort of the peak of American capitalism and consumerism. And the way he changed from the image on the left to the image on the right was this Coca-Cola advertisement campaign. So again, the product of advertising, not unlike you saw with Adam Ruins Everything and the traditional diamond engagement ring. So Coca-Cola puts him in a white and red suit to sort of match their logo, and it becomes a lot more after that. Christmas becomes a lot more of a consumeristic capitalist holiday where everything becomes a lot more about buying presents. Now, today, there is a bit of a debate going on. Well, not today, but about 5 years ago, Megyn Kelly on Fox News got in a lot of trouble for saying that Santa Claus is not black. I guess there was something going on in the news where black Santa Clauses were starting to appear at this time in African American neighborhood malls, and Megyn Kelly was furious about this, saying that you are changing our tradition, that you shouldn't change traditions, and that the Santa Claus goes back hundreds and thousands of years, but St. Nicholas, as many of us know, was an actual historical character. That is where St. Nick Santa Claus is sort of comes from. But St. Nicholas wasn't a saint who was going down people's chimneys and delivering consumer goods to children who were good children that year. St. Nicholas was an actual saint, and he lived in what is modern day Turkey. He would have, at that time period, he would have been part of the Greek Empire. But he probably did not look like our modern day Coca-Cola Santa Claus that looks very Northern European, like almost maybe Swedish or Norwegian or something like this, from the North Pole, you might imagine. But he may not have looked necessarily African American either, but he certainly wouldn't look like this. And so what are we even arguing about when Santa Claus is a fictional character? Why do people hold these beliefs so tightly? Well, again, people think that it is traditional, and that is a power judgment to some extent, where it is superior to other non-traditional ideas, foreign ideas, and things of that nature. So I will put a link to some of the Megyn Kelly information. If you're interested in the Santa Claus debate, you can find out more. I don't know that much about it, but it was something that was quite talked about. I think it was 2010. I could be wrong. So can you identify some traditions in your own culture? Just think of something that's traditional. Easter, for example, or some holiday. Is this a new tradition or an old tradition? Now, after you've done that, I'd like you to listen to the Hidden Brain podcast, because they talk quite a bit about traditional marriage, what I like to call previous marriage, that was oftentimes not for love. Marriage was for a very long time in human history, not just in Western cultures, but in other cultures as well, much more about economic security and relationships between families. People got married to ensure that they would have children, that those children would have food to eat, and love was considered frivolous and a luxury. Only very, very wealthy people who didn't need to marry for economic reasons could afford love. And this started changing with this sort of Jane Austen model of marriage in the 17 and 1800s, where love matches through stories, through a reconfiguring of what love is, started being a lot more about idealized love. That is what we sometimes call romantic love. At this time, actually, men were considered more romantic. Men were the ones who were always swooning over women in this sort of Shakespearean sense, going to women and confessing their love for them, where women tended to be the more practical ones that, no, I can't marry you. You have no money. This is bad for me. And that's because men were in a position of power. They had power and privilege, so they could afford to potentially give up some economic security in order to marry somebody that they were really madly in love with, rather than taking economics into consideration. And this is a theme that you're going to hear over and over again throughout this class. So this is just a little introduction. Please listen to that podcast, and then I'll have some lecture after that.